So good afternoon, everyone. We're starting the meeting. So this is RCEA Board Clerk Lori Taketa with some announcements. Here in this room in the Warfinger building, we have a new system. The microphones still will remain on through the entire meeting and are live throughout the entire meeting. Please speak one person at a time and say your name if you remember when you start speaking, so people online and the phone can follow the discussion. We have no online board members today, but we do have some people presenting who will be joining us remotely later. For community members participating in public comment periods and those who are reporting to the board, please come to that podium over there if you can, so the microphone picks up your voice. Online participants, click the raise hand button in the webinar controls. Phone participants, press *9 to raise your hand, *6 to unmute, and raise your hand early so staff we don't miss calling on you. Public comment may be limited to 3 minutes at the chair's discretion. Email comments have been accepted and are being accepted at publiccomment@redwoodenergy.org until the chair closes the public comment period for that agenda item. And I believe that's all for housekeeping, Chair.
All right, well, welcome everyone. I'd like to call the May 22nd, 2025 meeting of the RCEA Board of Directors to order and introduce Carlos Diaz. You want to say hi? And
yes, my name is Carlos Diaz. I'm the new city council for Fortuna, so I'll be representing Fortuna for this board.
Excellent. Well, welcome. And I guess we should do a roll call.
Hey, so Director Arroyo. Here. Director Bauer.
Here.
Director Diaz.
Here.
Director Garachi.
Here.
Director Jorgensen.
Here.
Director Ramos.
Here.
Director Napier.
Here.
Director Schaefer.
Here.
Director Tuttle is absent. Director Wilson.
Here.
Vice Chair Wu. Here. There is a quorum.
Excellent. And we don't need to do a roll call for remote directors. So item 2 is reports from member entities. Everything.
I got one. So I went to the Association of California Water Agencies conference last week. It's AQUA. They always have a water and power session that I go to. And they're talking about how the rise in AI is needing more data centers. The data centers need more cooling, so they need more water. So they're using a lot of water. And the factoid that I picked up was that for every AI generated email that you may, ask the AI to create and send for you, it takes 1 bottle of water. They use a lot of water, and it's all consumptive water too, because it's not recycled. It's just like once through cooling and evaporates off.
Interesting.
I have not to mention the amount of energy it also uses.
Well, I actually did ask staff because they said that a lot of the wastewater treatment plants, if they want to do reverse osmosis to treat the water, that takes a lot of energy. So then they'll also do a self-generation thing like solar with battery or something like that. But the investor on utilities are giving them like an 8 to 10 year interconnection timeline. So it's not great.
Director Arroyo?
I attended the Pacific Offshore Wind Conference, as did Director Ramos, I know, and quite a few other folks in the room were able to be there. And I was invited to speak on a panel about local government and offshore wind. So it was a great opportunity to share some experiences. It felt too brief, but was able to mention that I, serve in this capacity with RCEA and lift up some of the work that our partners are doing in the region, and it was really cool. And I also had a chance to have an impromptu dinner with our assembly member, Chris Rogers. Like many busy people, sometimes if you text them last minute and say, "What are you doing for dinner?" They're free. And so I mentioned the matter that came up at our last meeting around the CPUC and recognition of tribal nations, and he said he'd love to learn more. So I I didn't want to miss that opportunity to mention it because he was specifically asking about how he could help our region. And I didn't have too many notes, but I did bring up that matter. And so I wanted to mention it here, that I kind of put it out there, and you know, there's a lot of receptivity there. So I think that's all I have to report, but would like to do the groundwork of getting a better set of information about what the issues are to him. I sort of just took the opportunity while the opportunity was there. So.
Sure. Anybody else? All right. Item 3, oral and written communications. This is a time provided for people to address the board or submit written communications on matters not on the agenda. At the conclusion of all oral communications, the board may respond to statements. Any request that requires board action will be set by the board for a future agenda or referred to staff. Anybody from the public? Anybody online? No. Okay. Move right along to the consent calendar. Item 4, all matters on the consent calendar are considered to be routine by the board and are enacted in one motion. There is no separate discussion of any of these items. If discussion is required, that item is removed from the consent calendar and considered separately. At the end of the reading of the consent calendar, board members or members of the public can request that an item be removed for separate discussion. Anybody, anything to remove from the consent calendar? I don't need to read every one of these, do I? Okay. Can I get a motion on the consent calendar?
Move for adoption of the consent calendar.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call vote? Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 6 is new business, and that is Lori. Hi.
So we have been just jamming through financial audits for our RCEA, trying to get it all caught up. And now our auditors, Baker Tilly, are ready to present the results of fiscal years ending June 30th, 2022 and 2023. And so I'll hand it over to Bethany. I did want to address a couple of things, but I think I'll wait until after Bethany Ryers, who's partner at Baker Tilly, presents. Hi, Bethany.
Hello. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for having me today to present the results of the fiscal year 2022 and 2023 financial statement audits. If you want to go to the next slide. Also, as an FYI, Ryan Tyler is also here. He's the manager on the job. So if you have any very detailed questions about any of the testing that he did, he's more than happy to answer them. But for the presentation today, I'll be going through the general audit results. So as part of the audit, we provide you with a few deliverables. The first is the audited financial statements, which includes that all very important opinion in the front of the financial statement saying, you know, everything's materially correct and in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. The second is it's got a very nice turquoise cover, and it's called the Audit Insights and Results Report. And that really is our required communication to the governing body of everything and the overall results of the audit and everything that we did. So I'm going to go through that at a little bit of a high level detail, talking through that required communication. And then of course, there's a little discussion on the impact of future standards. And of course, if you have any questions about the financial statements or that report, I'm either me or Ryan, we're both more than happy to answer any questions that you have. If you can advance the slide, please. So the first thing I want to talk about is our general responsibilities as it relates to the audit. You know, we are required to plan and perform the audit to obtain reasonable assurance that your financial statements are materially correct and in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. That reasonable assurance is not absolute assurance, but it is a very high level assurance. And now if you were to look at this slide from the last time we presented, which it doesn't seem like that long ago, you'll notice there's a lot more requirements on this slide as it relates to our responsibilities. And that is twofold. First, in 2022, the authority received some CAP funds, some federal funding, which required a single audit, which we performed and provided that to you in a separate report. A single audit is generally an audit of a specific grant agreement. So that is just ensuring that the authority is in compliance with all the requirements of that specific agreement and all the items that are listed that you're required to follow, and in addition with controls around that grant agreement. In addition, you issued some RUS loans in 2022. The RUS loans also requires that we perform the financial statement audit in accordance with government auditing standards. That's also required when you have a single audit. We're required to follow some additional standards. Government auditing standards are also known as Yellow Book. All that means really is that we have to follow some additional requirements. Those requirements generally relate around additional continuing professional education that we're required to maintain, as well as a higher standard as it relates to independence requirements. In addition, you'll notice when you look in your financial statements, there's 2 additional reports that were issued because we had to perform this audit in accordance with government auditing standards. And that is at the very end, there's a report on internal control over financial reporting and compliance and other matters. And then there's also an independent auditor's report on compliance with aspects of contractual agreements and regulatory requirements. And that is specific to the RUS loans. So I just wanted to point out those 2 additional reports that are at the back of your audit report. So overall, we are required to perform that opinion after we do all of our procedures that says that your audit is free from material misstatement and again, presented fairly in all material respects in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America. Do you want to advance the slide, please? Okay. As part of the audit, we do look at key transaction cycles. We do review procedures and controls over the key areas in your financial statements, including testing controls over disbursements. And we look at areas with significant estimates, which includes your allowance for doubtful accounts as well as unbilled revenue. We also look at any new accounting standards. Now in 2022, GASB 87 related to leases was effective. And in 2023, GASB 96 related to subscription-based IT arrangements was effective. So the authority evaluated both of those standards in this audit report. It was determined that they didn't have a material impact on your financial statements. Therefore, you don't see the impact included in the report at all. But as an FYI, they were evaluated and determined that they were not material. I want to go to the next slide, please. Okay. And here are those key financial areas that we review. Generally speaking, any material account that you see in your financial statements is reviewed in some way by us, either through confirmation procedures, substantive analytics, or reviewing the detailed transactions that make it up, i.e. sampling for detailed invoices or support or contractual agreements to ensure that everything is recorded in the correct account in the correct period and in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. If you want to go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So all in all, as I mentioned, your audit was performed in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards as well as government auditing standards. And that audit objective is to provide that reasonable assurance that your financial statements are free from material misstatement. your financial statements for both years did receive an unmodified opinion, which is considered a clean opinion and the highest level of assurance that we can provide to you as your auditors. There was one material weakness noted in the financial statements, and that is detailed in the audit results report. As part of our audit procedures, we are required to, again, as I mentioned, review procedures and controls over those key financial areas. And if we come across a control deficiency that rises to the level of either a significant deficiency or material weakness, we are required to communicate that directly to you. And as is very common with organizations of your size, we are providing a material weakness related to financial statement close, just because as part of the audit process, we did provide some audit entries, which are also included in the report, and did prepare the financial statements for you. In addition, when you look at those separate reports that I mentioned in the beginning that were specific to the audit as it's performed under government auditing standards related to the single audit as well as the RUS requirements, you'll notice there were a few findings that were noted specific to the RUS loan and some of the specific requirements that they have in there. Just as an FYI, those compliance items are included and were discussed with management as part of the audit as well. If you want to go on to the next slide, please. So there is about a 3 to 4 page section in that Audit Insights and Results report that is specific to our required communication to the governing body. It is, I will say, very boring to read, but it does include a lot of very good information as to what we do as part of the audit. So it does talk about those accounting estimates that we noted as part of the audit. There's a discussion about the audit adjustments that were made. If there were any new accounting standards that were material or had an impact to the organization, it would be listed there. Luckily, none were material to the authority in the current year. There's also a discussion about that we are independent as it relates to the authority. If there were any issues as it relates to the audit, it would show up here. The fact that it is boring and fairly boilerplate is good news, because that means there were no issues as it relates to the audit. There were no significant unusual transactions or disagreements or anything like that we would be required to communicate to you. But of course, as you have time, if you have any questions as you go through that required communication and you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're always happy to answer those. If you want to go on to the next slide, please. Okay, so we have upcoming governmental accounting standards. It looks daunting, but it has shrunk a little bit as we keep working through the years, as we work through the audits and get you caught up. So the next one that will likely have an impact to you will be GASB 101 related to compensated absences. That will be effective in your June 30, 2025 fiscal year. And what that standard does is it actually kind of lowers the bar of when you would record a liability as it relates to compensated absences, so your vacation and sick leave. The old standard was it would have to be probable that you would be paying out your sick leave or some benefits, and then you would record a liability. This new standard says you would record a liability if it's more likely than not that the sick or vacation or whatever benefits will either be paid out or used. So it is a lower bar, and we have seen that some entities will have to record a slightly higher liability because of it. So it's just one other standard that will need to be evaluated and reviewed as part of that audit. The other two that we have little check marks next to, GASB 102, also effective for 2025. relates to just a footnote disclosure as it relates to certain concentrations and constraints. So if you have a concentration or constraint that could potentially have a significant impact, it could result in a footnote disclosure. Nothing overly exciting, but just as an FYI. And then lastly, GASB 103 doesn't change any debits or credits or how the numbers are reported, but it does change kind of how the income statement will look in the future. It does move some things around and change some categories. It defines what operating and non-operating revenues and expenses are. So you might see some movement on the statement and things presented in a slightly different way, but it is purely cosmetic. Okay, if you want to go on to the next slide, please. So I do want to mention, I guess, two other things. First, obviously, thank you so much for everyone at the authority for all your help during the audit. It was a very busy year. There was a lot more going on in 2022 and 2023 than had been previously with the RUS loans, the additional requirements, and the single audit. And they're always incredibly helpful and responsive to all of our requests. So I do want to say thank you to everyone at the authority for all their help in helping us complete this task and give you your report. Secondly, California has a requirement that you need to rotate the signer on your audit report after 6 years, if they've been doing it for 6 years. And I know it seems like I've only been chatting with you for a few times, but every time I do, it's related to two separate audits. So we have met that 6-year requirement. Luckily, Baker Tilly has a dedicated energy and utility team with 3 separate principals where their sole focus is energy and utility municipalities. So what we're going to do is transfer or move your audit to one of those other principals. So Jody Dobson will be taking over the audit as and signing the report for the next go round. Jody has been in our energy and utility team for over 25 years. She is the public sector practice leader. So she is actually our go-to anytime there's a question about a governmental accounting standard or a weird transaction. She's the one we go to help us answer it. So I do want to say I appreciate all my time working with the authority, and I've really appreciated the relationship that we have with you. But I know that you will be in very good hands with Jody going forward. And also Ryan, who will still be doing the details and heavy lifting related to the testing. And lastly, does anybody have any questions? I also, on the next slide, I believe our contact information is there. So if you ever do have any questions or concerns throughout the year, we're happy to answer them. I'm excited that, the next set of audits will be 2024 and 2025, and then you will officially be caught up and you'll be able to get on a regular audit schedule going forward. So it's very exciting to see.
All right. Thank you, Bethany.
Thank you.
Any questions? Natalie.
I know this was a couple of years ago already, so I was curious about that matter of the internal controls and closeouts, and then the other matter that's this is on pages 132 and 133, just the sort of summary of the intro, but the discussion about the doubtful accounts and like writing off a percentage of sales. Are there any things that have changed in practice since then that we should know about, or any areas you think we need to kind of bring something up around these two topics?
Yeah, well, I will say, as Bethany mentioned, they've performed 6 years worth of fiscal audits for us in the last year and a half. So we are basically learning a lot in a short amount of time and consistently improving. with our procedures. And I will say for our overall policy for the doubtful collections, we do have that as part of our financial management policy. I think what Baker Tilly was calling out is that it would be good to, I guess, have a clearer formalization. So right now we account for, per our financial policy, we include a reserve for bad debt and uncollectible accounts. And I calculate it based with our power manager, the Energy Authority. And we account for that on a monthly basis. And so I think very clearly, and it says on an annual basis, if actual collections experience indicates, we shall modify the reserve appropriately. So I think as part of that in the closing process, just specifically saying like, we looked at it and we've decided to modify it or not. So that is how I interpreted the recommendation, and we will certainly do that. Yeah, I think that's all I had to say about that. But yeah, we're continually improving processes and really value Baker Tilly being willing to take all of this on and get us caught up, and have so much patience and care when it comes to helping us improve our overall operations. And yeah, it's been great. Which is, I mean, something that you don't maybe say about an audit, but it's been overall really great.
Yeah, I'll say that there's a fair amount of money rolling through this organization. And so whenever we're saying that, oh, we haven't had a, completed audit for those past years, it always made me nervous. And I kind of assumed that we had caught up because 2020, you do the audit on 2024 and 2025. So, I mean, it seems like we're caught up.
Almost fiscal year in June 30th.
Oh, okay, fiscal year, right. Okay, gotcha. Okay, but no, good job, you guys, because it always made me nervous, and now that's gone. So yay, thanks.
What held us back from getting this far behind it?
Well, before I was in this position, we had a local auditor, and they started, we started our community choice aggregation business in May of 2017. And so they completed fiscal year end June 30th, 2017, and decided it was not for them. And so we then needed to go through a process of choosing a new auditor, and that was during some employee turnover. So it was delayed. We chose that new auditor and had trouble, I guess, with that transition of relaying the information to the new auditor because it was a little bit messy, basically, of the turnover. And at some point didn't feel like the communication was very good with that new auditor and decided to mutually part ways, but a year had passed where we were under contract with them. They basically, put out new solicitation, essentially, chose Baker Tilly and have had nothing but a great relationship with them since. But it has just been, they're a large team, but obviously things take time. So we completed the field work for these 2 years in beginning of January. And, now here we are in May presenting the results. So everything just takes time too.
Well, I appreciate that you got it caught up, and I assume that'll stay that way going forward. We'll get behind like that. Thank you.
Anything else?
Lori, did I may have missed, do we have a doubtful account policy?
You do, that's part of our financial management policy. So it is towards the end of so we have a financial management policy. It's part of our key documents on our website. It's board approved policy. And there's a paragraph in there that is about doubtful accounts. And I can read it right now. It's a very short paragraph. RCEA shall include in its annual budget a reserve for bad debt or uncollectible accounts. The budgetary reserve will be calculated by the Director of Business Planning and Finance in coordination with RCEA's contracted power manager, who's the Energy Authority, on an annual basis. If actual collections experience so indicates, the bad debt reserve shall be modified appropriately. So essentially, that's what our policy is so far.
So the write-off will float up to 3%.
It's supposed to vary. So I think, what Baker Tilly was getting at is that annually we should be looking at our aging and do a reconciliation at the end of the year and understand if what we have been forecasting as that 3% is accurate and make any adjustments going forward. So we're not there at the end of the year now, but we have been for past years, been working with Baker Tilly to make sure that that's accurate. So I think they pointed out that in 20 and 21, it was not accurate. We were still the Energy Authority hadn't updated it, and we hadn't updated our sort of reserve that we were targeting to record every month. And so we changed it, and we feel like it's on track now. But we'll reassess in July and look at our aging for this past year and make sure that that 3% reserve calculation is still accurate.
Thank you.
Is that, we had more aging accounts, right, during COVID and all that. So, and I remember we talked about that and that, obviously those are increasing. So has that leveled out, or what, when we have to calculate this reserve that we keep behind, do we, assume that there's going to be an increase or that it's about level now, or what?
I guess maybe it's leveled out. We had that as part of our risk management report in February.
Okay.
I did take it out today's risk management report, but we can ask again.
Yeah. I think we also looked at it as one of the indicators last month when we did the affordability workshop. So we did see that it was leveling to some extent, and we could see that spike during COVID.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things we're watchful of on the horizon, with economic shifts and other things is being mindful that that's one indicator as people have trouble paying their bills. And so just kind of watching that and making sure we're on it.
Right. Any further questions? All right, any public comment? Any in the room? No, and I don't think anybody's online, huh? Okay. Willing to entertain a motion?
I'll move that we accept and approve the financial statements in 23 and 22 audit.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. This is a roll call, huh? Or
Sorry,
just,
does my motion include all of it? Does it need to say the report on furlough? That too.
and that. All that. Motion and second, just straight up, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Bethany and Ryan again, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good job, staff.
Yes, great job. All right, next, this is community choice, energy, and confirm we have a quorum. We have a quorum. Item 7.1, semi-annual energy risk management report. I think, Richard, are you starting?
Start. So yeah, again, I'm Lori Bandini, I'm the Business Planning and Finance Director here, and I'm going to get us started off on our semi-annual energy risk management report, and then I will hand it off to Richard Engel, our Power Resources Director. So I guess as a reminder of one of the main functions of our energy risk management process is to keep apprised of our forecasted revenues and expenses associated with the community choice aggregation business. And so here we are, just trying to make sure we keep you apprised of how those forecasts are looking. And so two, I guess, main components of our CCE program revenues are, of course, usage or customer usage, and then the rates that our customers are paying to use electricity. And overall, our current fiscal year electricity sales revenue is coming in lower than what we had forecasted or budgeted for this year. And that was in part prompted our power manager, the Energy Authority, to update our overall load forecast for forward-looking years. And Richard will go more into details about that. But it basically prompted the Energy Authority to update the load forecast to be more in line with what we were experiencing this year and previous years. And that in itself lowered our load forecast. So overall, what we are delivering, the energy we're delivering and getting paid for has gone down. Additionally, the second component of our CCE revenues is the rates. And we have our new rate forecast coming in based on the ERA filing that happened this month. As a reminder, the ERA is the Energy Resource Recovery Account proceeding with the California Public Utilities Commission. And that's used to determine that the fuel and purchase power costs by investor-owned utilities are the amount basically of those costs that can be recovered in rates. And so that has come in, and our power manager, the Energy Authority, has updated those forecasts of what we think that we'll be able to charge for rates for our retail rates. And overall, it was a decrease in our generation rates and an increase in the power charge indifference adjustment, the PCIA, which means for us, we've got lower revenues because we have a decreased load, and we also have probably a drop in rates. Potentially good for customers, but overall that means less retail revenue. And then for the other part of this, the costs, we have our forward energy price changes have just gone up a little bit. We've got forecasted costs for 25 and 26 up a little bit. But overall, what we're seeing is that the impact to our retail revenue is much greater than the impact to costs. So we've got a little bit, costs are a little bit up, and then retail revenues are a lot down. And then also on this year, or on this slide, we can see that there are overall decreased prices for environmental products and capacity products, which is overall good. However, we are mostly hedged for the upcoming years. Next slide, please. So this is just showing us what the net is. So as I mentioned, for fiscal year 24-25, we're coming in a little bit lower than what we had anticipated. And this again prompted the Energy Authority to update our load forecasting, and then in turn affects fiscal year 25, 26, and 26, 27. So for this upcoming fiscal year, you'll get to see the kind of details and the budgeting that we present a little bit later. We're expecting some reduced net revenue, and then for fiscal year 26, 27, negative net revenue at this point. Next slide, I think this just is how the Energy Authority used to present our information, which is calendar year. We find, presenting the information via fiscal or by fiscal year is more helpful, but calendar year is here as well, because that's helpful too. Then because of this news, our overall cash projection is a bit decreased as well, but still overall looking okay, actually pretty good. We just would potentially be flush with revenue. And I think then I can hand it over to Richard.
Afternoon, everyone. As Lori said, I'm going to look a little more in depth at what's going on with our electric load, because this is kind of a new emerging phenomenon that we're seeing just through the most recent analysis that the Energy Authority's been doing for us. The financials in the report you're seeing today show a lot of improvement if you look at it relative to May 2024, when we were setting the last annual budget and giving you a risk presentation similar to this one in format. But as Lori's shown us, we're actually down pretty significantly from what we presented to the board in February. And that does draw significantly from what TEA has been seeing with our electric load. It seems to be that it's tied largely to a decline in the number of customer accounts that we have. From late 2022 to late 2024, so the 2-year period, we saw the number of residential accounts go down by about 2.5%, and the non-residential customer accounts similarly declined about 2.3%. First thing that got me thinking is, oh my God, are customers opting out of our program more? And so our analyst on our team in-house looked at the numbers for that. I hadn't seen evidence up to that point that we were seeing increased opt-outs, but I wanted to make sure of that. But Matthias took a look at this and confirmed that we don't see opt-outs going up. So in other words, it's like, it's not that our market share slice of the pie is shrinking, it's that the whole pie is shrinking, really. It's just the number of electric accounts in Humboldt County overall that we could potentially have is going down. But at the same time, it does seem like the loss of customer accounts might have been tilted towards larger customers. The actual load decrease over that same 2-year period was more on the order of 12%. So a lot more than just as accounted for by, being proportionate to the number of accounts we lost. So we've been looking into that. We hypothesize that this is largely tied to just the decline in the cannabis economy that is affecting Humboldt County in a lot of ways, we know. In addition to losing some commercial accounts that we know of specifically that were cannabis accounts that aren't there anymore, we're also seeing a decline in high usage by the highest using residential accounts. And that might point to just kind of the phenomenon of cannabis grow houses going away. We know that like City of Arcata implemented a high energy user tax years ago, close in time to when we first launched our CCA program, and they were trying to get at that very problem. So they set an index that I think it was 600 or maybe 700% of baseline usage. If a customer was using more than that, they would be subject to this high user tax. And it was effective that we saw the amount of high user tax revenue and the amount of customers from which we were collecting went down sharply in a pretty short period of time, to where it used to be hundreds of accounts and now it's just, I think, a couple of dozen accounts that are being at that high user tax monthly in Arcata. So there's that going on, but there's also some significant large customers, Sun Valley being, of course, a very notable one. That one customer alone was around 1% of our total loads. That was a chunk to lose. And another thing that we're seeing that might be having some effect, but it would just be starting now, I think, is we know that, with some federal government changes, leases are being terminated on some, commercial offices for federal agencies. So that might continue to push load down somewhat. And then you've probably seen in the news recently, just like looking forward ahead at what we can expect, that, Nordic Aqua Farms, which we've talked to the board about, is potentially a very significant large new load for us. It looks like their timeline for actually building out their facility is being pushed out by probably several years. So we can't really expect that to come in and make up for lost load too soon. So those are just some things that are, and I will say in our actual load projections, we're pretty conservative on that, and something that's speculative like Nordic Aqua Farms, which is still in the process of getting permitted. We haven't been modeling for, our load is going to increase by 10 or 20 megawatts that they've been telling us they're going to use. That's not something we've been banking on when we're projecting future loads, but I just wanted to mention that as another factor to think about what this curve might continue to look like going forward. So the graph here just shows the monthly total energy, and you can see there was, a pretty steady drop over those 2 years from 2022, then to 2023, and then 2024. And TEA is currently projecting the next couple of years to stay pretty in line with the 2024 load, which I think makes sense to do because we don't really have strong evidence that we're going to continue to see that large of a year-over-year decrease going forward. Can we go to the next slide, please? Looking at PG&E rates, which Lori mentioned was another factor that is expected to drive our net revenues down some. This is just looking at, and sorry, the units here are dollars per megawatt hour, which is how TEA, and we usually think of energy costs when we're procuring. We know that retail customers, pay in cents per kilowatt hour. So you can move the decimal points over to account for that. But it's showing for the last year, the current year, and next year, the residential generation rates. So this is not all of PG&E's rates, but just looking at the residential generation rates, it's kind of a proxy. You can see that in the current year, we've got rates higher than last year, but then there's expecting a significant move downward in the generation rates for next year. So these are PG&E's generation rates, but as you know, we said ours is just a small discount below those. So those are pretty good index to look at for what we can expect to collect in customer revenues. And then the graph on the right is that power charge indifference adjustment, which is the charge assessed by PG&E on CCA customers, in addition to the generation rates that they pay to RCEA. So we're always having to set our own rates with these PCIA rates in mind, because the sum of our rates and their PCIA is what the customer is paying in lieu of what they would otherwise pay PG&E if they were staying with them as a bundled customer. The PCIA is, as you can see, expected to go up modestly, and that's also from our net revenue standpoint, bad news, because that just forces downward the rates that we can collect from customers and still stay competitive with PG&E rates. Next slide, please. So this is just a forward look at the PG&E generation rates in blue and the PCIA in red. Things are not shown as changing too radically compared to February when we last looked at these with you. And you can see the kind of the main ups and downs with PG&E. Part of it is actual rate shifts, and part of it is just the seasonal going between winter rates, which are lower, and summer rates, which are higher. But there is still projected for further out in 2027, which we were not looking at in the last graph. We actually see the PCIA going down. So that's some good news further out in the future. Next slide, please. And these are forward energy prices. So these are, these go from today out into the end of 2027. And so these are essentially what we would pay today for hedges at any of those dates in the future. So you can see sort of the factory and camel kind of two-humped effect each year of there's like usually a summer spike in prices and a winter spike in prices. And the change in recent years has been the winter spike is actually higher than the summer spike. These have not changed all that dramatically, but overall these prices are going up by 2024 has gone up 7% from the last time we gave you a look at this in February, 11.4% for 2025. 9.7 for 2026. So just 10-ish% increase for future years relative to what we were seeing last time we looked at these numbers with you. So again, just some all kind of cautionary notes that explain why the net revenue numbers that Lori showed you in those graphs don't look as good now as they did in February. Happy to take any questions for me or Lori, and I'll just mention we also have Jacqueline Haar from the Energy Authority in person with us today. So she's our lifeline if you ask any complicated questions that we might struggle with.
Yes, Sarah.
we always feel this whiplash. It's really red and then it's really green and then we're back to red again. Do you think that with this idea of shifting to a cost of service model, we will see less of that kind of intense change or more, or like how will that impact kind of that future financial forecast? Do you think?
We do expect to see less of the whiplash, because the intent is to not change rates as frequently as we do when we're just trying to follow PG&E. However, I will say a note of caution on that is in one conversation I had recently with another CCA staff who, was one of the first CCAs to go with cost of service rates, was they said when they initially went to cost of service, they intended to only do a rate change about every 2 years. And they've actually been doing multiple rate changes per year still because of the fact that they really still need to keep an eye on PG&E rates to stay competitive. So she did say that it's made their rates certainly less volatile. But not to the degree that they had hoped for.
Yeah.
So, I think we should, keep our expectations in check for how much of a game changer cost of service rates might actually be.
And it feels good, to see that, PG&E is planning on lowering their rates in 2026, but then, that brings that kind of uncertainty of where we're going to be. Yeah.
Any questions?
I know like just 2 days ago or something like that, PG&E put out what they're gonna request in the 2027 to 2030 general rate case filing that they're doing, but was, since it was very recent, was that incorporated into these projections for 2027 yet, or was that just too recent to have been incorporated?
So the general rate case process takes a very long time, so while
Okay.
it's for the time period that's within scope here,
Huh.
it's going to be worked through a CPUC process and various entities battling it out. Like generally at PG&E, like when they ask for something, the general rate case, they assume it's gonna get argued down by at least a third, and
Okay.
that process all has to play out. So it'll come into the rates eventually, but it will be more of a, this is what the rates we were supposed to collect in 27. It's now 28, and we finally finalized the general rate case, so now we'll update rate.
Okay, I thought those were gonna start, I mean, they're really touting it being a small increase comparatively, but I wasn't sure if that they actually hit in 2027, so that's really helpful.
I mean, they will eventually get back approved to 2027, but it's gonna take quite a while. There's a number of very positive consumer advocates who fight that.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, the projected reduction in PG&E's costs or rates, I should say, in 26 is, what are some of the factors that are behind that projection?
I think it has been partly that we've seen some relaxation in just some of the things that we sweat over. So resource adequacy costs have come down significantly. Renewable energy certificate costs have come down, and power market costs, there's been some, it's still volatile, but there's been some decline on all three of those compared to some of our, recent risk updates that we've given the board. I don't know, Jacqueline, if you want to point to any other factors.
But, yeah.
Any other questions? Yeah, Frank?
When I don't know if it's a comment or a question, but when PG&E comes out and says what we see in the newspaper or on the news media is PG&E says they're asking for a rate increase. But is a lot of that rate increase, to my understanding, is distribution, not generation. And so I guess that's something we don't see publicly, the difference, because the news, they don't know what.
Yeah,
It is, because it's all bundled when they say, we're looking for a rate increase, it's a bundled package.
Yeah, we had a graph when we did the affordability discussion last month, where we showed the breakdown of how much of the increase in rates over the last few years has been attributable to the transmission and distribution versus the generation. And the generation has seen a little bit of increase, but by far the transmission and distribution has been the driver for rate increases. And within that, it's been the wildfire mitigation in the last 2 years, hardening of the infrastructure to reduce wildfire risk has been the big driver for that.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Another question.
Go ahead.
Sorry if I missed it, but did we show any graphs that showed the projections versus the actuals over the past number of years?
We were more forward looking than backward looking in these graphs, but if the board's interested in that, I think we could, give you sort of a catch up on, what projections were in the past and how they played out. We get, like, as far as the load part of it, we get pretty detailed look at that with the Energy Authority and monthly presentations they give to our staff, to our team. And they always give like mean average percent error, which is just how much their projections varied from reality, and it's generally in the low single digits. So I think that's kind of the main thing that we have control over, is being able, via the Energy Authority's expertise, is being able to accurately project how much our load is going to be. And from what I've seen, they do an exceptionally good job with that.
So given the decrease in customers and load that RCEA is seeing, and the fact that we're moving toward disassociating to some extent from PG&E's rates, what does that tell me something about that? Tell me more about what you're thinking now that those two things are coming together at once.
Just like coupling. Can you repeat this? Because
I mean, we're facing in general less use, right? Less demand. At the same time, we're able to some extent, set our own rates. And so, how do you think rates may or may not change in order to compensate for the change in number of customers, or what will our ideals be? What's our priority? Because, it seems like, I mean, you would have to raise rates to keep the same amount of revenue, right?
Sure, yeah.
But we also want to, that's probably not on the table for us. We want to run a viable authority, but we also sort of want to celebrate that loads come down, and I mean, that's a good thing, right? So, maybe there's not a question there, but would you add anything other else to that, other considerations that?
Sure, yeah.
You have in mind?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly have fixed costs. We have fixed costs and variable costs, like pretty much any business. And so if our load goes down, then the fixed costs that stay about the same have to get spread across maybe a smaller number of customers. If it is like a declining customer count, that's really part of the picture. So that could translate to higher rates. I do think on the generation side, where we operate, those fixed costs are less significant as a percentage of our overall costs than they are for a full service utility, because they've got, poles and wires to maintain, where the costs, those are really, really huge fixed costs that don't change with the amount of load. With us, there's some economies of scale where when we're procuring more power, our unit cost for the power is less than it is with a small load. That relationship is not as linear as it is when you've, got that, a lot of infrastructure, a lot of assets to maintain. So I think it's a vulnerability for us, but maybe not as much of a vulnerability as it is for like a municipal utility or an investor-owned utility that has to maintain all that infrastructure.
We can bring our costs down. That could compensate for the change. Generally, the cost of the renewables in our portfolio, I don't remember, are they equivalent to non-renewable, or are they more or less?
Well, the way we kind of look at it is, we do these hedges, which is just kind of brown power. It doesn't have any of those renewable adders on it. And then the renewable energy certificates are an incremental adder on top of that. So we are paying more for every megawatt hour or kilowatt hour of renewable energy that we deliver to customers than the system power, the part where we don't, attach any environmental attributes to it. But, historically, those numbers, the incremental cost of renewable energy has come down a lot from where it used to be when, renewable energy was first a thing being traded on the market. And going forward, it's like the capital cost, in terms of what they call levelized cost of energy, which is looking at the whole lifetime of a plant, what it's going to deliver and what that's going to cost per unit of energy, has gotten to where it's typically lower for like new solar plants than it is for building like a gas combustion turbine plant. So, we could be looking at, a future where effectively, renewable energy certificates have a negative cost because it's cheaper to generate green power than brown power. We're not there yet, but I think, although we've, had to deal over RCEA's history as a CCA with increasing rather than decreasing renewable energy prices, I think the long-term arc is still downward. So I think it's, still a good bet to be saying, let's have a large renewable energy portfolio.
Are we considering any local generation beyond offshore wind that would contribute at scale to our portfolio?
That's the question we're going to come back and talk to you in detail about in June. We think that's a really important question to address soon. What are the opportunities besides offshore wind that can be done at fairly large scale? There's onshore wind, which unfortunately the community was not happy with the one opportunity to do that at pretty large scale in the recent past, or two opportunities really over the last 20 years. And then there's, biomass power. When our Repower Humboldt study was done by Schatz Center and RCEA back about 12, 13 years ago, they were looking at bioenergy really being a very, very large component of our energy portfolio in 2030, which was the year that they were analyzing and modeling for. So maybe there's a pathway to that. We're working on that by participating in the biomat program now. And as you know, we already have some bioenergy in our portfolio locally. And then there's wave energy, which we're very interested in. That was, PG&E had a Wave Connect project back in the, decade plus ago, which when I was working at the Schatz Center, we were involved in that, really wanting to look for ways to build on wave energy. And that was actually being considered an important future resource also in that Repower Humboldt study, more so than offshore wind, interestingly, because nobody was making serious proposals for floating wind platforms yet back in 2012, 2013. There's those, solar coupled with energy storage is important, but I don't really know if there's like a land base in Humboldt County that people are willing to dedicate to doing that at the scale that we would need to really, like, for example, fully replace the amount of energy we're currently getting from biomass. And then there's small hydropower. We had Michael Furnace do a study for us a couple of years ago on opportunities for that across the county. I think most of these opportunities are, a few megawatts here, a couple megawatts there, not things that we're going to do at 100 megawatt scale, like the Kern County Sandrini project, that we have in our portfolio now. But I think in aggregate, a couple of megawatts here and there, could add up to being really transformative. But we do, want to come back to the board next month for a serious conversation on how important that local sourcing really is.
Thanks.
I will add, I thought that was the topic of discussion at the Community Advisory Committee earlier this month. And it kind of got brought around to the point that, like you said, with like the TerraGem project, that there are a lot of projects that are on the horizon and that are interesting to people, but oftentimes they are large and they do not get permitted or approved, either by the county, by various municipalities, whatever it might be. And so, that ability for us as elected officials on this board to be able to advocate to, our various agencies to try to, bring that forward as something that's important and that we want to see in this community as well. And, I know, our tribal partners have been huge on that, and seeing what, Blue Lake's done with microgrid and everything like that. There are cool opportunities out there, but how do we get it built is a big, I think, hurdle as well.
This conversation about risk is not going to be where we solve all of our revenue challenges. But since we're having this very stimulating conversation, I still have to ask, crazy question. Can we serve more customers?
So the way that other CCAs are largely answering that lately is expanding their service areas.
Yeah.
Quite a lot of that, until, I mean, there was kind of a big wave of new CCAs being formed around the time that we started our CCA, and the next couple of years after that, we went from just having a handful of CCAs to now having 25 of them. That increase in number of CCAs leveled off a few years ago, and we've only added 1 or 2 new CCAs, I think, in the last 3 or 4 years. But what we've seen as the changer now is existing CCAs expanding into neighboring counties. The big example of that in Northern California is Pioneer, that until now has only been serving El Dorado and Placer counties, is adding 5 more counties, really significantly. Like, I think geographically on the map, they're going to be the largest CCA, one of the largest once they finish that expansion. So we did actually have a conversation with the board, with a pretty significant different membership on the board, but a couple, I think Sherry and Frank might remember, when we had a conversation several years ago, because we were approached by a county supervisor from Trinity County. They have the public utilities district, but there's a small sliver of Western Trinity County that is actually in PG&E service territory. I think it's only maybe 1,000 to 2,000 customers, and most of them are residential, so it's not very big. But the supervisor was interested in them potentially joining RCEA. Mendocino County to the south of us is already serving Sonoma Clean Power. Lake County is interested in and starting to move towards joining Sonoma Clean Power. That really leaves Del Norte County to the north of us, which is Pacific Power. They're outside of the California Independent System Operator. That's, the balancing authority for most of California. And they're also outside of PG&E service territory. So there would be some, administrative and technical challenges, market challenges to expanding northward. We also talked to the board about that. I think it was actually in the same meeting when we talked about expanding into Trinity. And I think there was some interest, not officially expressed by the county board of supervisors in Del Norte County, but I think there were some stakeholders in Del Norte County interested in it. And I think it got a lukewarm reception from the board at the time. It was just viewed as something that offered limited benefit and a lot of extra bandwidth for the organization to take on. So that's really the only time we've kind of seriously thought about it, increasing our customer count that way. I mean, one other important thing we could do that I remember Matthew Marshall was interested in when he was our ED was potentially finding a way to serve customers who have direct access. This includes like Cal Poly Humboldt campus and some other large customers in Humboldt County. One way that we could do that is by becoming an energy service provider, which is the label for the type of entity that can provide direct access service. Interestingly, the University of California is an ESP. And other than that, they're mostly private companies that are out there just selling power to these customers. Haven't really worked on that or figured out if that's something that makes sense, but it's one other opportunity we have for increasing our customer count, other than just wooing back folks that may have opted out for one reason or another since we've launched our program. But again, we're still at 91, 92% participation rate. So there's not tons of potential there, but there is potential.
Well, I mean, again, this is sort of square peg round hole with this topic, but I would be interested in hearing more about that. I just put it out there and be interested in hearing more about sort of that low hanging fruit approach of wooing back the customers. But I think it matters when we think about, what our long-term revenues are, and it's strategic to think about it in that context.
What's the financial analysis? I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just want to add that structurally, the joint powers agreement right now allows members to come in from the adjoining, the directly adjoining counties. And so Richard just rattled off Mendocino's gone because they're with Sonoma Clean Power. And that leaves then Trinity and Del Norte. And
barely touched Siskiyou County.
And we barely touched Siskiyou. We have a sliver into Siskiyou. I don't know that there's Yeah, I know that there's many customers out there, but so structurally, the Joint Powers Authority, it can bring in new customers from the outside agency, counties, but otherwise it would have to be an amendment. And I'm not sure, probably not so to become an ESP. I don't know that, but we would look at that if there's board direction to pursue that.
You mentioned the cost benefit that the board considered when looking at Bill Moore last time. Is that something that can be dug up, and would it still be relevant?
I don't think we actually did any kind of quantitative analysis.
Okay.
The board and said, hey, we've heard from community members in Delaware County who are interested. What do you think? And the conversation just kind of died there.
Go ahead, Chair.
I think part of it too, Frank, you might remember, is that just the timing of it. We were trying to get our own act together. So taking on somebody like Del Norte, who was, like you said, had these other boundary issues. It's kind of more than we were willing to bite off at the time, but maybe we can look at it again.
Further questions? All right, thank you. Thank you. Vote to accept the report? We do? All right. Well, first we gotta go out to the public. And reflectory, no, no public online. Can I get a motion to accept the energy risk management semi-annual report?
Moved.
Second, Michael? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, motion carries. We'll move on to new CCE business, 8.1, approved community choice energy funded programs for fiscal year 2025 and 26.
I'll give the staff report. Great. Ask a point of order question. I know, I think we have to have a different seconder.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I just processed that one. I saw that.
CCE, sorry to make you feel not included.
I'll second. You have to revote.
I think, yeah, I mean, I think so. Probably.
Okay. So,
Do you revote? No, I think,
We should.
right, you should revote.
all right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, thank you now for that.
Yeah. To be a jerk, but you know. Lest our report acceptance be challenged in the future. All right, well, this one is also a result of just, doing things a little bit differently, making sure that we strictly follow the board operating guidelines and have CCA funded programs be approved by the CCA voting members. We would ask for that today and then build it into the full budget, which you'll hear the draft of today, but the actual budget vote will come next month. So this is sort of our step one in terms of the vote. To get CCA funded programs approved. And these are all built into the draft budget for fiscal year 25-26. So we'll go through these programs fairly quickly. The staff report for this item has the dollar amounts that are associated with each of the programs. And it amounts to a fairly small amount. It's less than 2% of our annual revenue. So for transportation programs, we would continue the RevNet, that's our electric vehicle charging network. And then the second one that is a difficult acronym to turn into a word, the resilient charge, that's the expansion of our charging network. And then we have planned for electric vehicle and e-bike incentives. These are the rebates that have been very popular. And then we would add fleet electrification technical assistance, and this is staff time only, but to help some of our local fleets come into compliance, assuming that the clean fleet rules stay intact for public fleets. And then just a little bit of funds towards this Caltrans wayfinding match program, which is where if we put in signage for our electric vehicles charging stations, Caltrans will match that and put in, accompanying signage on the highway system. So it just kind of helps people know where the networks are a little easier. And then we will, through energy efficiency programs, maintain our energy lending library. This includes things like induction cooking stoves that we can lend out for people to try out before they want to buy it. And then also resiliency programs such as terrace. The activities we're doing for terrace will be reimbursable if the grant is actually finalized, but it is a little bit of a risk. And if that were to not occur, this does come out of CCA funded programs. For the generation programs, this is where we look to kind of incentivize local generation and kind of get all those bits and pieces of megawatts, like Richard was saying. We have a few different programs there. The net energy metering, this is a solar where we add 1 cent to each megawatt hour for solar residential customers. And then the biomap program, we're looking to expand that and encourage folks to participate. This is would be very small scale biomass or biogas projects. The feed-in tariff, and then we will continue maintaining the Redwood Coast Airport microgrid. And then with also with CCA funded activities are the strategic planning and outreach that we do. So we are allocating resources to support the climate action plan, the regional climate action plan, outreach and education, and support for offshore wind, and the transmission planning project. And we are looking to increase community engagement this year. So we've set aside a little extra budget just for those efforts. And then there's a series of programs also in the budget, not CCA funded, but funded with external funds, such as the NREN, which is probably the largest one, a small amount for the local government partnership, and RRGP, which is the program where we're putting solar plus storage at several fire stations in rural areas. So these are externally funded, not CCA, just to make that distinction. So again, their request is to approve this suite of programs or offer us any guidance on changes. These, as I mentioned, these are built into the draft budget that's coming up as the next agenda item, but we are looking for a vote on these so we can officially have them in the budget for the vote in June.
Thank you. I have an interesting thing to share about the fleet tech assistance. So I work for the state and we're required to supposedly, phased in to all EVs. Well, I just fought for an exemption because my staff, drive to Xenia. And if they run an air conditioner and a police radio and all these things, can't make it home. And so I just thought it was like just realizing what a long ways we have to go to get into a point where we can actually can't do it. It's been it took in a considerable battle work to fight for a combustion engine. It was really weird on my part. I was like, this is the weirdest thing, but safety wise, we just can't, it's not feasible. So I look forward to us build another 3,000 charging stations. Any questions? Yeah.
I just want to say, I think that the programs are essential, and, expanding them where we can would be a priority for me. That's how we win back people. And also that's where we address some of what we see happening at the state level with the changes to the NEM tariff, for instance, where me personally, I think that was a beneficial program to start with and now is struggling. And those are the things that we can address. I just want to offer my support.
Yeah. Anything else? All right, we'll go to public comment. Anybody in the room? Nobody's online. All right, can we get a motion? Read it.
I will move to approve the proposed programs funded by revenue generated from electricity sales and direct staff to include these programs in the 2025-26 budget.
Second.
Have a motion and a second.
Can I ask about the reimbursability of that 50 grand? I have no problem laying that out, even if that were to not happen, which I'd be furious about, but I'm sorry, the 50,000 for tariffs. So you mentioned that those were reimbursable costs, and so if we were to get back in the timeline of that project, do we know when we'd start to realize those reimbursements, or do we not know yet?
So the end of our definitization period was in the end of April, and the federal government did a 120-day extension. So we're looking at August. The first time they asked or said they were doing an extension, it was 240 days. And so, I would say sometime between August and October, it's realistic. And when we would have a final award, if we make it through their review. Since we're under conditional award, the work that we're doing that are eligible expenses are reimbursable once we get to final award. They've made it very clear to us, though, that anything that we spend now is at our own risk.
Those would be essential costs that, I mean, we'd have to incur to get to the point where we're ready to execute the contract.
Yeah, so the costs that we included are legal and accounting costs and staff time. So, a project with multiple partners, we need agreements in place, sub-award agreements, and we want to move as quickly as possible when we go under contract with the federal government. So we're doing that work on the front end to be ready to sign those agreements as soon as we get the DOE, stamp of approval. And so, it's a lot of work. And if we were to wait until after we were under full approval, we would be putting the project in a quite substantial further delay.
How do we feel about our chances of this actually happening?
Changes hour to hour.
Yeah, I would say it depends what day you asked me. So our kind of current update is we've gotten a very large data request from the federal government. The Secretary of Energy has put out publicly that they feel like the previous administration put out billions of dollars in the days and weeks leading up to inauguration. And so that they want to go through with a fine-tooth comb and look at all of those awards to ensure it's meeting this administration's priorities. So we're in the process. They gave us a month. The instructions for the data request are 13 pages. So again, to your point of like what we're spending our time and money on right now is, we have to answer them or we won't be in, they've said that they could use us not responding as canceling the funding allocation. So I hear that, they've looked favorably on this project because they recognize that it's to the benefit for resilient communities that don't have a lot of other options, but it changes day to day.
Yeah, like everything else.
Can add something,
Please.
Which is a little piece of good news. The tribal electrification program was a separate grant from the BIA that the Yurok Tribe won to contribute to the overall terrace project. It was specific to a small hydro generation facility on Capel Creek. The tribe has won 2 of those awards, and the first one was officially unlocked. So that's $3.5 million that's going to go toward the design of the facility. It's not enough to build it. There is a second one pending. We haven't heard about whether or not that will be that will become available, but that's it's hopeful that we're moving in this direction. And also as a potential beneficiary of terrace, I want to say that the involvement of RCEA has been critical. The various tribes involved have benefited greatly from its involvement. And so Eileen and others just working very hard at making sure that happens. So it won't be for a lack of effort from our side if we don't get it. So again, it would be very disappointing, but do what we can.
Thanks for that. Appreciate
Is
it.
this a stage where letters or anything like that would be helpful, or is that like, nope, no, just let it proceed?
So before we, we do all of our advocacy kind of as a group consensus with all of the partners, and currently we've taken more of a quiet stance because sometimes advocacy done wrong with this administration can have more damage than good. So we've kind of been toying with how to effectively advocate for this project, but we definitely will reach out if the group and the tribal partners feel like that would be appropriate.
Anything else? I think we're at the vote part, right? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, motion carries. So that brings us to the end of community choice energy. And now we'll move on to, well, no old business. Item 10 is new business. 10.1 is proposed budget for fiscal year 2025-26. Introduction.
We're gonna, Eileen and Lori, B and I are gonna share this staff report, so we're ready for it. Gonna kick us off. I will say that we did meet with the finance subcommittee in the last couple of weeks before the board packet went out. So they had a chance to review our work. They asked some great questions that helped us kind of add some clarifications to the narrative in the staff report, but did not ask us to change any of the budget itself. So this is the budget you've got in front of you is the draft budget is unchanged from what the finance subcommittee saw. And then I just wanted to give some background a little bit on how we prepared the budget this year. We kind of kicked it off with all of the directors. We had a sort of a working meeting, a long day of a working meeting to kind of go over our different goals in terms of the department goals and overall RCEA strategy. And that got built into the budget that you have before you. As I kind of reflected on what we worked on that day, it kind of hit me that we really are kind of talking about three parts to this puzzle moving forward for next year. And so we have basically three focus areas. And one of the first one that I think will be really beneficial, I think it'll probably take us longer than a year to get there, but is really just a focus on our sort of efficient internal operations. You'll see in the staff report, we kind of report on the growth over the last few years. We've had a significant growth in turnover. I think half of our staff started since 2021, 2022 timing. So definitely have experienced rapid growth in a time where the world was also changing rapidly around us. And so I feel like it would benefit us a lot to make sure that our systems are kind of matching the size of organization that we are now. And so with that, we have ambitions to do things that sound sort of simple, but take a whole lot of time and effort. So to migrate our systems to SharePoint or file structures, looking at new payroll software and new accounting software. So those kinds of things, again, sort of simple to say, simple to budget for, a lot harder to actually, put in the hours and make sure that we do this in a really, in a way that really benefits us for a long time to come. We also want to be looking at our organizational structure and make sure that we've got workflow processes that make sense based on our departments. So we're getting some help with that. That was part of the consent agenda. In addition to doing the class and comp study. So looking at all of those pieces and again, making sure that we're kind of proceeding with the best structure we can to be the most effective. And with this same sort of internal focus area, I would add to that our financial position. So one of the big ticket items we are budgeting for this year is input into the financial reserve. So we have a full 5 million that we've targeted for financial reserves. Earlier this year, your board adopted the financial reserve policy, and we are really wanting to meet that. And we're on track to meet it. The trick is maintaining it. So getting it to be constant. So we need actually a lot more in our reserves to maintain the cash on hand target that we've set. So we want to be clear about that. We also, as we get these reserves, we want to make sure we're investing them so that we're making money on this stuff so that we can put more into our programs and more into our organization. And also by having these reserves, we can look into creditworthiness and get those ratings that will also help us bring down some of our costs for some of the other financial instruments we use. So a lot of benefits there to focusing on the financial reserves and making sure we're investing them in a really meaningful way. And then also, as I mentioned, with all of the growth that we've had, we need to take some time to really sort of reset and make sure that as a team, we're really cohesive and that we are, making opportunities for professional development and, just sort of internal staff mentorship. So that's kind of all in that first kind of focus area. And sometimes I feel like I could have stopped there and we would have enough to work on for the year. But really, we are all here for the programs in a lot of ways. So we want to make sure we have these great operations so that they really do support the programs we want to deliver. You've heard about a lot of those in the CCA funded programs that we just discussed, and more of those, we'll get more detail about them in the budget presentation, anything that we didn't cover. So I don't think we need to rehash all of those, but it's a significant amount. And I will just highlight too, launching the Northern Rural Energy Network, NREN. This is a really big lift and a really exciting thing that RCEA is leading this for so many different counties and being the portfolio manager. So that is something we've never done before and will really get fully off the ground this year. So we want to make sure we're really dedicating what we need to in order to make sure that goes as smoothly as possible. And then the final focus area is really community engagement and planning. And we have a lot we want to accomplish, and especially, as we plan for the future of this organization and we contemplate cost of service moving forward, we want to make sure that we have sort of the attention of our community as we do this and make sure that we're doing it in consultation with our community and not necessarily just sort of the few folks that are really, are tried and true fans, but really, electricity rates affect everyone. And we want to make sure that we're getting out there and reaching as many folks as possible as we think about making changes, and also elevating, our brand, so to speak. So making sure people know about who we are, the programs we have to offer, and can take advantage of those that would, benefit them. And along with that, wooing back this sort of, 8 to 9% of folks that are not in a CCA for some reason, and figuring out what's going on with that and if there's a way to get, even further on that. So I will say also in this sort of community engagement and planning, we do want to plan for a rather comprehensive update to the Repower strategic plan. I don't think that will come up in fiscal year 25-26, but we do want to be making the plans for it so that we're building that into the next budget cycle so that we're ready to go. So we'll have that as part of it. And then this is also where we look at what is our role in offshore wind? Where do we fit in with the regional climate action plan, and really doing outreach to all of our jurisdictions to make sure we know how we fit in with that. So those are kind of the overarching buckets. I think it's, plenty, a full suite of things for us to do, but it helped me at least to kind of think of it in those ways and how we're going to build out programs for the future, but also, really focus on what's in front of us. So now I think I turn it over to Lori there, for the next set of slides.
We already gave you all a preview of what this is going to be when we looked at our energy risk management report. So our projected revenue for the next fiscal year is down from what we projected it to be this fiscal year. And again, you all know why. Our retail, the biggest part of our revenue is, of course, our CCE business, and the retail revenues that we're going to realize we expect to be decreased. And then again, our expenses are not coming down equitably with those, the decrease in load. Our expenses for our CCE business are expected to be a little bit increased. So that result is that, we're going to experience a decrease in our projected net revenue next year from what we expected this year. And, but again, as Beth mentioned, we're hoping to put all of that towards our cash reserve goal. So just to dive in, and we will get more into details. So this is just a kind of a summary. For our electricity sales, our budget is expected to be 71.5 million. Our grants and contracts are expected to bring in 11.7 million. And our program-related service fees are expected to bring in about $77,000. And that's just related to the fees that we collect when somebody plugs into our electric vehicle charging station network. And then expenses, our wholesale power supply overall a bit down. As mentioned before, our personnel costs are expected to be increased, and Eileen will go over that in detail. She'll also talk about the expected increase in our facilities and operations line item, and communications and outreach, as well as our professional and program services. And then we are anticipating our incentives and rebates budget to be increased due to the launch of the REN program, and then our non-operating costs stays about the same, and that is interest on our USDA, our US loan. So just a reminder that we, are assuming maintaining a 0.5 retail rate discount from PG&E, which means, as Richard went over before, like if PG&E's rates go down, our rates also go down. This projections, all of these forecasts that we're presenting are based on the financial modeling from May 5th of 2025. And that's just a reminder that these things, as Director Shaver described, can be whiplash sometimes. So we have to just pick a point in time sometimes, and that's what we pick. This also assumes reinstating our renewable energy targets, the original ones that the board has set for calendar year 2026. So we paused those because we were looking at a very negative net position this time last year. We reinstated those about mid-year because things were looking up, and we still plan on continuing with those original board goals. And then, as I mentioned before, the Energy Authority recently adjusted their financial modeling, specifically related to the load forecasting, to be more in line with what we were experiencing. And that's overall just a decreased RCEA's expected energy revenue, as well as our wholesale power expenses. But again, those wholesale power expenses haven't come down as equitably.
Okay, so I'll go over the remaining budget line items. And I just wanted to reiterate, today is to get your input. If there's anything in here that you want us to change, or, before we bring it back for adoption in June, we will incorporate your comments. So just want to make sure you know that this isn't set in stone. This is for discussion. So our personnel costs are projected to go up 1 million. I just wanted to flag our external funding covers 2.2 million of those personnel costs. And this budget does not include any terrace funding. This is, we won't put that on the books per se until we actually have it in hand. So the funding, the external funding that we're talking about here is related to the Northern Rural Energy Network, the RRGP, so the solar plus storage at fire stations, and then the expansion of the charging network. And a question was asked at the Finance Committee, like how many FTE equivalents is NREN funding? It's about 12 positions that are funded through funds that we get through PG&E to implement energy efficiency programs and also manage the portfolio for other agencies. I recognize there are a couple board members who haven't sat through the NREN presentation, so I'm going to try not to use all acronyms. There are no new positions being requested, and we did put in a robust amount for staff training and professional development per kind of what Beth was talking about in her bucket 1 goals. In addition to that, we budgeted for some board travel. If you all, as opportunities arrive and if you're available, to start engaging with us more, outside of just Humboldt County. And then we did include 50,000 for the remaining amount for the class and comp study. We are already underway. We won't be finished by the end of this fiscal year, and we've are per the consent item expanding that scope to include an organizational assessment. So we budgeted for that. But still, you know, that didn't account for the full $1 million increase. So that was a little shocking to me. So I dug in to see exactly what that increase includes. And so where we come up with that increase with not adding new staff is we are recommending a COLA increase of 6%, and that accounts for $30,000. 300,000. And I have the next slide to go into detail with that. Our executive director position was vacant for 6 months in the 24-25 adopted budget. So that accounts for roughly 145,000. Our medical premiums increased 9%, which accounted for 63,000. And then really the big reason of the jump is we froze 4 positions when we adopted the budget based on our financial outlook, and we didn't unfreeze them until February. And we knew with the difficulty in hiring, we didn't even fully fund when we brought the budget adjustment back in February, those positions that were unfrozen. So this budget does fully allocate those 4 positions that we didn't account for in this current fiscal year. So on to the COLA. The board has an adopted compensation policy, which states that we'll do a biannual salary survey, which would have been done this year, would have been brought to you this month and adopted in July or in June. That policy says that we look at comparable labor markets and benchmark our job classifications to those other markets. The last time this was done, it was in 2023. We did enter into a contract with a consultant to do a full classification and compensation analysis based on board direction. And that's not going to be done until September 2025. And we're really looking at bringing those results and recommendations to the board with the mid-year budget review, because we want the board to take into consideration any recommendations with the full budget picture. So in recognition that salaries haven't increased, we are proposing a cost of living adjustment. Whatever the board approves as a cost of living adjustment, it'll be rolled into the classification and compensation study that the third party is doing. So what we looked at was the All Urban Consumers West region for the past 2 years, and the Social Security Administration. The total of those two for the past 2 years was 5.1 and 5.6%. We included 6%, which is our recommendation, and we're looking at some of our member agencies. I think Arcata and Eureka both had a 5%, 3%, and 3% for 2024, 2025, and 2026. So we're feeling like the 6% is in line with what some of our member agencies are doing. And again, will be included in the analysis that comes back to you with the full classification and compensation study.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Is that okay, Scott?
Please.
Are you suggesting that this be sort of until the class and comp study is complete and we take action based on that, or for the entirety? Is it budgeted for the entirety of the year?
It's budgeted for the entirety of the year.
Okay.
So the intent wouldn't be with the classification and compensation study that you would decrease it or remove it.
That'd be awkward.
Yeah. But that if they were recommending further increases, that 6% would be taken into account. And that 300,000 accounts for not just salaries, but any other supplemental benefits that go up with the increase to salaries. So it's the full cost of that for the year.
Just to interject with Director Jorgensen sent a couple of questions my way right before the meeting that I wanted to speak to related to personnel. And it was what budget line accounts for the cost of leave days owed and what is the current policy on converting vacation days to payoff days? Do we have a maximum number of days that can be converted? So I was just going to point out that the payroll line item in the budget includes an assumption that all full-time employees are paid a full year salary, which would include any paid time off and holidays. And then we don't track vacation liability separately from our regular payroll liability. But you'll notice, and Bethany Ryers kind of spoke to this a little bit, it does appear separately on our audited fiscal statements. So we have a long-term liability that is like accrued wages. And that's what she was saying, like if you reasonably expect that the employees will take vacation after, post 12 months from now. And then the regular like accrued compensation, which just accounts for our regular payroll liability. But on our own financial reports that you see every month, it's not separate. Did that answer? Hopefully. Oh, and then the policy, a vacation can accrue up to a maximum of 2 times the employee's annual accrual. And once this cap is reached, you can't accrue anymore until you use some vacation. And then once per fiscal year, employees that have completed 5 years of service may cash out up to 5 days of vacation using the approved cash out request form. So if you get to your max, then you can cash out 40 hours.
Thank you.
So facilities and operations, and you'll notice on each of these slides, I call out external funds that we're anticipating to fund portions of this. It's a little different than in the past. Just NREN is a quite significant influence on our expenses and our revenue. So I wanted to call that out. So in facilities and operations, this budget is 2.17 million for fiscal year 25-26. External funding covers 577,000. This is specific to NREN. It's the development of databases, software, and memberships. It also includes 60,000 for new financial software. A portion of this also includes our CalCCA and CC Power memberships. CalCCA is our trade professional group, and CC Power is it's 9 CCAs that have come together and pooled our resources, and they do things like advocacy, but also procurement, so that we can maybe get deals that as a small CCA we couldn't get alone. And so there are annual dues to participate. And you'll see we have costs associated with CalCCA and CC Power on another budget line item. So that's why I'm calling this out here. That's 252,000. And then this next line item, I want to say that we came up with this number at 445,829. It's not because we know that's what it's going to cost. We did our budget, and then we said we want to commit to 5 million going into reserves. And what was remaining from our projected revenue was that number. So what we are proposing to do, again, up for discussion with the board, is to dedicate funds to hire a consultant, a design firm, to really do a financial feasibility study of whether or not it's in RCEA's financial interest to build on our existing lot an office building. So for those of you who are new, we currently lease 2 buildings in Old Town. One we outgrew, and so we now have some of our staff in one, and then we walk a couple blocks for meetings to another. Right in the middle of those 2 buildings, we bought an empty parking lot and had intended to build an office building large enough to incorporate all of us. That estimate, we did an RFQ for design and engineering, and that was 1.2 million just to do the design and engineering for the building. And that was the year that our finances looked really really bad. And so that was one of the first things we removed from our budget. We've also wondered if it wouldn't be more financially feasible for RCA to purchase an existing building and remodel or a long-term lease option. So we really want some help, someone who could say like, this is what construction costs are versus new build versus remodel. What are our actual square footage needs before we really jump in with both feet into a long-term commitment that may not be in RCA's best interest. So that's where we came up with that number. It's net minus 5 million.
And if I could just add, and what we don't use for sort of this initial feasibility part would be sort of the very beginning of seed money towards a capital fund.
Go ahead, Frank.
Are we keeping questions to the end or we jump in here? Or
You can ask questions.
one thing that this would probably seem the appropriate place to mention it is the cost that for the rest of the board is the magnitude of what the cost of building that building was going to be and how much it would be the difference between what it costs yearly to buy a new building versus the one of maintaining it. And just saying that by doing this study, rather than just assume some things, I think this is the thing that's really important to have, is that the staff is taking this step. And I think the board needs to hear those numbers because the cost of that new building is staggering.
Yeah, so when we went out for RFQ for design, what we were seeing, the firms that submitted responses, assuming the cost of construction alone was in like the 8 to 10 million for a new building of the size that we would need for our staff. For our staff, also a place to actually have our board meetings in our building, a demonstration center for the community to come in. And so, you know, looking at just say 8 million of, if we were to put a down payment and finance it, our monthly mortgage payment would be around 50,000 a month versus I think right now both of our leases is around 10,000 a month. And so that, you know, those numbers really struck us of like, how do we determine what is the appropriate amount to be paying for property as a public agency?
Just one recommendation, if there's the possibility of a stage gate design contract, we could enter into, if we had a $1.5 million design RFP, you know, there would be plenty in there. It wouldn't take all of that to incorporate the feasibility study into that. You wouldn't be obligated to continue if, say, the results of the feasibility study weren't supported by the board, for instance. But you would, if it was and you had the additional capital, then you'd have that momentum built up with the first architecture firm, and you would have, you know, a program having been developed with them and a rapport. So I think it's, you know, would save the organization money over time if it was the same firm who was continuing on rather than trying to restart.
Yeah, that's what we're doing with the operations center we're building for the city. Yeah, firm, it's a design build kind of thing.
He's not talking design build. He's talking feasibility design.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah,
And then build.
and then build.
Yeah.
Engineers love that.
So communication and outreach, there is an increase and external funds cover 40,000, but I'll let Beth speak to why the increase in this one.
Yeah, and this kind of goes to, you know, my bucket 3 there about community engagement. And I think just with all we have on the horizon, it's very apparent to me that, you know, just kind of raising the awareness of our organization. And we have all of these programs we want to be implementing. We want to make sure that everybody knows about them and can equally take advantage of them. And so this is just an effort to sort of elevate our brand a little bit and make sure people know what we're up to and how they can, you know, participate with us. We might even get some folks coming to our board meetings. Yeah. But yeah, that's really the purpose of this. And so with that, we have some brand awareness research that other CCAs have also done to kind of see like just starting point in our community. Like, do people know about RCEA? Do they have positive feelings or negative feelings? You know, and I think that's a good start, and that will give us great information to move forward with, especially as we look at cost of service or things where we may have to like kind of change our narrative a little bit. And you know, when I do the call log report, you know, the opt-out calls we get is always like, are you more expensive than PG&E? And we right now can always say, no, we're not. If that were to change, what's the new story? What's the value we're bringing to our community that we need to kind of change that and make sure that people still want to stay in the CCA, even if it is a little bit more expensive. So this is all meant to give us the background information we need to have those, you know, kind of talking points and essential points of contact with our community to be able to encourage folks, you know, along the way.
So professional and program services, this is a quite large budget, 9.9 million. And let's say external funding covers 6.4 million of the total. This is where you see our NREN contracts for us to implement as a CCA, for us to be the portfolio administrator, and also the pass-through contracts to our partners. So we're partnering with Sierra Business Council that serves the Sierra region. We're partnering with Lake County and Mendocino County. Then this is also the Regional Resilience Grant Program, 16 fire stations, solar plus storage, 1.03 million. And then finishing up our North Coast Resilient Charging network, and that's EV chargers at community centers at 10 locations, 284,000. It also includes funds to get caught up on our audits. So the next 2 years of audits, 103,000, 320,000 for special projects through CalCCA and CC Power. We get a tremendous value from participating in CalCCA to lobby and advocate on our behalf. We don't have the internal resources to be, you know, responding to every protest letter and, you know, thing that comes through either at the Senate or the CPUC. So CalCCA provides that for us. And then the amount on CC Power are contracts that we've already entered into for generation or battery storage projects that we entered into as a whole with CC Power. We did earmark 100,000 for the cost of service rate making analysis. We have a solicitation open right now for a consultant to provide that. It will close the first week of June, and we'll be reviewing the responses that we get to that solicitation. And then I just wanted to flag 2.5 million is really the baseline professional services we need to operate as a community choice aggregator. So our data management, metering, billing, scheduling. So this is, you know, we have a service that tells us what portion of the PG&E revenue comes to us as our customers, our TEA services. And so this is just, you know, highlighting that it's a not cheap endeavor to run a CCA. And then our incentives and rebates budget, 1.6 million. So NREN covers 1.5 million. So these are the incentives, direct incentives, rebates that will be available for Humboldt County residents and commercial customers. To be eligible for this, they don't have to be an RCEA customer. They just have to be a PG&E customer, because the money comes through funding that is collected on the PG&E side. But it is administered by RCEA through the NREN. And then we're, per the programs we had identified earlier, we're asking for 100,000 to continue our electric vehicle, residential EV charging equipment and e-bike rebate program. When we relaunched this, we ran out of funds in months. So there was a huge uptake. And so, it's been a very successful program and we want to continue it. And then 10,000 to the Caltrans wayfinding match funds that Beth mentioned earlier. So last slide on the budget, just kind of an overall summary, that the proposed budget includes putting all net revenues into reserves, 5 million. The board recently adopted a reserve policy. That policy had a minimum target of 120 days cash on hand and a maximum, or a maximum's kind of, I don't know the right word, but a target of 180 days cash on hand. So based on the budget before you, the minimum amount would be roughly 22.1 million. And the 180 days cash on hand would be the 33.1 million. So what that cash on hand actually means is unrestricted cash. So like cash we could use for anything. As of May 9th, our balance is 37 million, but it includes some funds that are earmarked or not unrestricted. So there's 6.3 million that we have to maintain for CC operations cash flow, 700,000 for non-CCA operations cash flow. And then of that total, 6.6 million was prepaid NREN funding. So what that means is it leaves 23.4 million of unrestricted cash. So that's what we're calling our reserves. The good news is we hit our minimum. So if we were below the minimum, the policy says we need to start taking actions to address. We haven't met our target of 180 days, which is why we're recommending putting that 5 million aside. The May 5th financial model showed negative net revenue for the next 2 fiscal years. These numbers are a little different than what was presented in the energy risk policy. And I think that just shows you from week to week how much it changes. But right now, the model we're using for this budget, it showed negative 3.4 million in 26-27 and negative 3.5 in 27-28. So all that to say, I think those of you who've been on the board for a while knows it fluctuates. And so we may come back to you at mid-year and it's positive for the next 2 years, but we don't know. So we really feel like it's very important to build up our cash reserves, to stabilize rates, to weather those down years where if we move to a cost of service model, maybe we don't have to increase our rates in a down year. Maybe we can use a portion of reserves to get us through that. Also, it just increases our ability for credit worthiness, which when we enter these contracts or these PPAs, it actually is, it's cheaper to do business if we get a credit rating. I think
I wanted to address another question that Director Jorgensen sent me before the meeting, which was, what's the plan or current practice for maximizing earnings on our reserves funds? And the plan is that we just adopted the investment policy last fall. And I have been starting to have conversations with the Energy Authority along with our general counsel on trying to adjust the way that they assess RCEA's risk and the way that they charge us fees for risk, so that we can take money out of the accounts that they have access to or see and put them in something that actually earns us interest. It's been a slow slog. working with attorneys from Umpqua Bank, which is our bank, and the Energy Authority. But we are in the process of trying to be able to actually implement some things that we laid out in our investment policy.
Good.
Can you roll it back to the COLA slide?
Mhm.
Okay, so, did we not do the 2.9? Or what COLA did we do in 2024? Did we do 0?
0. So in 2023, the biannual salary survey, so our policy tells us what agencies to look at, and then we compare similar job classifications between the agencies that we're told to look at. That resulted in an average of RCEA being 12% below. But that was looking back. And so in 2023, the board adopted a 14% increase, accounting for what we were below the previous 2 years. And so that we didn't have any increase in 24 or 25. Well, we're asking for a 25 that encompasses 24 and 25.
Right. And so these COLAs here, though, aren't representative of our local agencies, right?
No, this is much broader. And that's why, I looked at it short of looking at everyone and kind of recreating the biannual salary survey, which we're putting completely on pause.
That's different, though. See, because that's why I'm kind of I'm not understanding, is that COLA, cost of living adjustment, is for, that you can look at that locally here, but I'm totally on board with the salary survey, the title is, because that I'm pretty sure is gonna, and won't that, assuming that says, hey, you need to increase to get people comparable, won't that be increases in that table with the steps and all that? Isn't that what we would increase?
Yeah, and this would too. What the board approves today, the percent, we would bring back the table to you in June. And that table, all those would be increased by 6%. Yes. And then the board could, we split out the EDs from the rest of,
Right.
and then the board could decide to extend it.
So at the risk of do you guys know that Reddit thing, the AITA? Yeah. Yes. At the risk of being written up in that Reddit, I'm gonna quibble with 6% versus 5%.
Okay.
Because I think that, because we just did this at the water, like last week, and we did pull in the local agencies, and they're, for this year, they're in the 2 to 3%. And so I guess we're rounding up is what we're saying in the 6%.
We rounded up, and then looking at Arcata and Eureka, so they both had the same, in 24 it was 5, and 25 was 3, and then they already set 26 with another 3. So that was 8.
Okay,
Just 20.
Those are some of the agencies and cities we looked at. Some of them have like a 3-year thing, and some of them do it year by year. Yeah, I can share that with you guys if you want. But
And that was, I believe Fortuna only had one for 24 and hadn't finished the 25, and so I didn't write that one down.
so I get the catch up. I wanted to make sure that we had 0 on 2024, and that's the case. Okay.
I'd like to add on to that. I'm kind of finding myself aligned with Sherry, and it's not a desire by any means to shortchange our staff. I think that's fairly consistent with what I've seen for and I'll just say we're a different agency than the county. The county is not in a position to consider any of this. So I think if we're gonna compare local agencies, it's a mixed bag for sure. I think that the negotiations that typically that the unions come to are comprised of different data, and it's not just a COLA, it's a lot of different things coming into that. And so I don't know that there's an equivalency there, but I do think it makes sense to give a COLA for the period of time until we decide what we're going to do with our salaries. And then I'd like to see those step increases and consider that in the adjustments that we make. And I think at least in my time on this board, which has only been a couple of years, we've been able to give increases commensurate with what this what an analysis of other agencies like ours showed. And so I look forward to doing that, but I'm thinking along the same lines as Sherry on this one. I think it's a little bit apples and oranges to compare us to the jurisdictions that are kind of taking into account some other things.
What's the, I guess I'll ask me, what's the consumer price index past couple of years though? Like, it seems like inflation's been pretty extraordinary.
Oh, sorry, I actually have that exact graph that he just asked for because it was in the water district packet.
Yeah, I mean, if talking about what we're trying, what we've done to city and whatnot, I mean, I'm fine with the 6%. I mean, to me, 2 years without raises is pretty rough, and being one that's not getting one this year because I think it's completely unfair, and I would never ask that of anybody, but I think it's fair. I think, inflation's pretty astronomical, it seems like, at least when I look at my bills. I tend to lean the other way and keep what's proposed.
Any add?
Please.
Okay, I'm gonna take it back. So I'm not written up on Reddit. But so I'm looking at McKinleyville, CSD, Humboldt, CSD. Again, these are water agencies, City of Arcata, City of Eureka, and us. And the COLAs in FY 24-25 were 3.2, 4.3, 5.5, and 3.2. So those are 24-25. And then the requested, and then like we were saying how some of them have the 3-year MOUs. It was 2.25, 2.5, 3, 3, and 2.5. So I take it back. So I'm okay with the group that.
I also just want to say my level, like, I think this is an uncomfortable way to do this, because the last time we talked about the class and comp study, it was about, getting the data and having that. And I think, we 2 years ago, we adjusted salaries pretty significantly, and that was like data driven. I think the class and comp study, we talked about at that time through a series of difficult and awkward conversations about salaries in this agency, how much we needed to pin our decisions to that. And then, I'm pleased that we're going to have that data. I whether it's 5 or 6%, I'm not personally going to quibble with, but I do think my preference in the future would be to really be using that as a guidepost.
Well, and that is our policy. And so this is an out of the norm. And, it is just, it's hard to budget for something you don't know and then make staff wait from September to February, depending on the results. And it also doesn't feel fair to the board to make a decision on an item that wasn't budgeted for. So it's more of like a timing issue, and this was kind of a compromise that we're proposing in the meantime.
I did wonder about the positions that were held, that were frozen. I mean, given that our, obviously we see volatile information when it comes to revenue projections. We've seen that be especially all over the place with the volatility in the market and resource adequacy and all the other challenges that we've had. But I guess I'm wondering about those frozen positions. Are they all filled now?
No, so this budget includes 39 full-time positions, and right now we have 5 vacancies. So the amount is if they're fully filled, but we do have 5 vacancies that were.
This budget has us budgeting every penny with 5 million going to reserves, which is getting us to sort of our I would say our minimum, yeah, it's like our minimum standard. It makes me a little nervous to include all those positions in the allocated budget this year. I'll just say, this whole picture is a little bit tighter than I had hoped. I don't know if any, but I also don't have the everyday expertise that you all have with how essential those positions are. So can you say a little bit more about those positions and whether potentially holding some might be reasonable or whether those are needed right now?
So one of the positions is a grants and contracts analyst, which builds our capacity to manage these external funds and seek additional external funds if things, for example, fell through with tariffs. I'm going to try to do this from my memory because I don't have this written down. We have a position to build capacity with the finance team and the administrative team. So a coordinator position split between the 2 departments. And then there are 2 positions that are included in that are directly 100% funded by NREN for implementation. And then the last position is a specialist position that we actually didn't fund for the whole year. So we're still in consideration if we have a full 40-hour a week, 52 weeks a year work for that position. And so we funded that starting in January while we determine whether or not we need to fill that position. So we did take consideration of workload and is this something that needs to be filled now? Do we have funds to fill it, or is it something we can wait on? So there was one position we only allocated for half the year.
And I will also mention through the kind of organizational chart review that we're engaging in, I think one of the things we realized with the class and comp is it doesn't take into account like volume of work. So we'll make sure people are working in the right classification, they're being properly compensated for it, but it doesn't actually help us know, like, is this is too much work to expect an individual to do. Like, it doesn't go through that part of the process. So one of the products we can get with that organizational chart is like, do we have that balance correctly? Do we need to, actually bring on more or, do we have capacity that maybe we didn't realize because of the way we have things divvied up? So I think getting that sort of third party insight might be really valuable, especially because we've grown in new and interesting ways. I mean, even the community choice aggregation program, it's not been around forever. So I think it'll be great to see those lessons and kind of have that input into like what makes sense for an organization like ours. And then we can continue to, kind of aim for right sizing going forward. So I think having these positions that we're going to hold back a little bit help us with that to say, wait a sec, let's get this other information in place first. And then certainly the help with having NREN fund some of those feels far less risky.
I just had one more thing about salary and benefits. Why only the 2 years worth of vacation is there versus like an unlimited amount you could accrue? Can we?
So I believe it's tied to state law, and if it isn't, because that's the practice at most public agencies, and it's mitigating risk. So if you let someone accrue 1,000 hours and then they left, you now have to pay out, and they could have accrued 900 of those hours as, a lower paid salary, and then they,
Yeah.
and so it's just kind of keeping it in balance with what is appropriate for someone to reasonably take off. We have to pay out vacation when they leave, and so we're reducing risk to the agency.
In the state, we're 640.
Okay.
You know, some people have 1,000 and it's a problem, but.
For vacation or for, okay. Well, so it is tied to what you can accrue. So, you know, with longevity, most of our employees start accruing at a faster amount.
Yeah.
So, you know, a 1-year employee's max is going to be way different than someone that's been with us for 10 years. So I'm sorry, it's not capped at 240. It's capped at 2 years of what you can accrue in a year. Is that?
Yeah, that's what I understood. I just felt like, why couldn't we do more? But I get it. Thanks. Any other questions or?
A question on the cost of service. Do you think we'll make more income every year, or it will go down? Because I feel like when it favors RCEA, we're leaving money on the table, but then like when it favors PG&E, customers will be calling us to try to exit out.
Yeah, I think that's really these big sort of conversations we need to have. Like, what is that tolerance? I think that's part of the reason why we can never entirely decouple from PG&E, because of that risk of opt-out. It is, you know, a competitive endeavor to be a CCA. And so, you know, there is another option. And so that's why something, you know, sometimes if I think other CCAs have, specifically in addition to their reserves, like a rate stabilization fund, just for that purpose, so that they can weather that. And there, you know, if we look at kind of what we've been through, yeah, there's times we've been, you know, benefited from PG&E's rates and times that it's really hit us very hard. So I think that is exactly what we'll be bringing back, kind of the modeling of like those future outlooks as we go through these discussions. Yeah.
Are we moving forward already, or are we still talking about it?
And we have an open solicitation for that right now that's closing, I don't know, soonish. We're in the question answering mode of that solicitation.
Cool.
And I'll just add, you know, what we expect to get from the consultant is a model that tells us, you know, if the board sets your reserves at here and has approved these programs, this is what your rates should be to, you know, to meet the goals of the board, essentially. If the board's goal is 100% renewable, these are your rates to meet that goal. And then the board decides ultimately to set the rate and can adjust based on those recommendations. So, I mean, it really does start to be like your decisions on what you approve have a, you know, a tangible effect on what the analysis tells us our rates should be. And then decisions are made from there.
Yeah, our budgeting will look differently for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just a comment. I don't want to lose sight of adequately housing our staff related to building, of course. And with the current study underway, maybe they can be coaxed to give an opinion on that, because we're looking at efficiency of personnel. So I would just like to see if there may be something that comes up in that regard. And then, and this may probably well go years, but if in 6 months, and I think you said this, Eileen, an adequate facility came available, we should consider anything that may occur like that.
Agreed.
Besides, have one last thing on that $100,000 for incentives for e-bikes and. Can we, if mid-year, we could, if we wanted to add more, if we're already like spent out, we could do that, right? If we have enough ability, just to be thinking about.
Because they're cutting the, EV credits. So, I mean, $100,000 won't go too far at all.
Enough direction? It's just a right direction, right? Anything else?
Also just urge your jurisdictions, because like Arcata does provide money also towards those e-bike credits and stuff too, and to stack them really incentivizes people to use them. So I know probably RCEA pays a lot of those out to people in Arcata, so it's a good idea for your own cities.
All right. Public comment, I think is nobody on.
Now it's our own team.
Pass by.
Right. No votes necessary on that, I believe, right? So,
Scott, you had a really long city council meeting this week too.
yeah.
Oh my God.
You got yelled at yesterday.
Yeah, we had a pretty long one. There's.
Right, moving to staff reports.
Easily.
I just have a quick couple updates for you. We have rescheduled the battery storage workshop. This is meant to be an informational program, just about, battery storage and the realities of that and any concerns around that. So we have that scheduled for 5:30 on July 23rd at the D Street Neighborhood Center in Arcata. Lori T will certainly be getting more information about that. And we are going to be doing sort of a shorter rendition of our affordability workshop at the Eureka City Council in July. And just want to, again, offer that to any other jurisdiction. If you would like to have that in your own venues, we're happy to bring that on the road. And we can tailor it for as much time as you want to give us. I think the original presentation took about an hour, but we did a lot of like what our CEA is doing about policy and things like that. That's easy to cut, but we can really, you give us a half hour, we'll make it work. You give us 10 minutes, we'll make it work. So let us know if you want us to bring that to you for the presentation. That's it for me.
All right, any questions? All right, item 12 is future agenda items. Anybody have anything to talk about? Frank.
Well, it doesn't have, I'm not asking it to be next month, but kind of along the lines of what Sherry was talking about with this AI thing. I think I mentioned it at the financial meeting. It said this would be more the appropriate place to bring it up. Is what this cost, and I keep hearing more about the cost of what AI is going to attack on particularly on the power grid, and then how it affects us, how we anticipate that affecting Humboldt County individually. Because this, everything I understand about it, it's just going to take, it's taking horrendous amounts of power to do what they're going to do, whether that's a positive thing or a negative thing, it doesn't really matter. The matter is that when there's only X amount of power in the grid, and as people access that power, and the ones that have the money are going to buy it, or they're going to get it somewhere, whether you buy it through whatever means we buy or sell power, there's only so much that you can get. And the ones that have the money are going to be able to get that, and the ones that don't won't. Now, is that going to, in the end result, end up affecting our local community and how it affects the essential regular consumer? And so if we could get some, again, it doesn't have to happen in the next month or so, but I'd like to put it on there that at some point when we have a time that we can have a presentation to understand particularly how it's going to affect the local CCAs, being us, with people tapping off on this power.
Yeah.
You can put that together.
It's very interesting. Yeah, I'd heard a photo, like, making a photo of your friend as like president. You use
Oh, right,
AI.
right.
It's like driving 1,000 cars for a day or some astronaut, it sounded astronomical. I was like, I don't know about that, but that was a San Jose City Council member who they have like 3 data centers coming in for AI. And the power consumption is insane.
Right.
So, yeah.
How many models?
And that's what people post. They're building these data centers. There's one, I think it's in Louisiana, if I may have my mind wrong. But they're powering it's with gas. And then they're gonna build another one that's twice as big as that one. And, so you got all this AI being built and all that, but you got all this electric power you need, everything's turning electric.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, people are sucking all this power off. And so how do you supplement it? You run big generator.
Nuclear plants.
That's really where they're headed.
Bring back their presentation. Yeah, it might take us a couple months to get that together, but definitely we are engaged in those types of conversations and happy to bring something back.
Yeah. I just say this is something I don't think can wait. I just wanted to bring it up. It's Senate Bill 254. Electricity, also known as the Electricity Family Electric Rate Assistance Program. It's a super interesting bill for municipalities, should look at it. It's worth supporting. Check it out. Because it's moving fast. All right. That's it. We'll adjourn, and the next meeting is Thursday, June 26th at 3:30 PM right here.